Hey, what's up, guys? I'm so pumped about this conversation I just had. I had Dr. Daniel Franz on the podcast, and he is an incredible human being. Just full of life, full of purpose, and truly understands what it means to seek out meaning in your life and the value of seeking out that meaning. So much so that he is actually, I'm going to read this here so I get it right. He's a diplomat in Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. And if you're not familiar with Viktor Frankl, stay tuned. We're gonna dive a fair bit into that. But bottom line up front is that he was a psychiatrist who was captured by the German Nazi forces and was imprisoned for 3 years in in several of their concentration camps. And he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Very, very powerful stuff, and started this idea of logotherapy, or the use of therapy with the purpose behind it being your search for meaning, the power of your search for meaning. So I think that's very powerful. But Dr. Dan also is a licensed mental health counselor. He's also a licensed clinical addiction counselor. He's also an MBTI certified practitioner and facilitator. And very, very cool, he's also the host of the the Meaning Project podcast, where I was actually a guest on there recently. And so you guys can check out my episode where he got to shoot some questions my way, and we got to discuss some of the military background and the training and the resilience training that I did there, and how that's transitioned into now the civilian and private sectors. And this was my chance. This was our round two of sorts, where I was able to kind of take the driver's seat and ask Dr. Dan a lot about him, his background, and how he came in to this logotherapy, and what drives him, and what makes him believe that this is such a viable course of action for people, especially in this day and age. Stay tuned. I think you guys are going to love it. I am experimenting with something when it comes to having guests of the show introduce themselves. And so you're going to be my first one in the shoot for this experiment.
Excellent.
Everyone always wants to say, tell me about yourself. Give me a little bit about your background.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do something a little bit different. And I think this aligns with who you are and what you teach and what you preach.
All right.
So
you're not going to warn me, are you? Or
nope.
Are you?
Nope, we're rolling
sweet.
right into
it. I love it.
I know that you're up for the task, which is why I felt confident.
Cool.
So I want you to just complete this sentence. So I believe that these are the two most powerful words for any individual in any situation throughout their entire life. And so I just want you to finish the sentence. It is, I am, and then proceed. So from your perspective, not from me, Dr. Dan is, or
and you only want 2 words.
No. I'm just saying the 2 words are I am. Those are the 2 most powerful words. And so you start your sentence with I am, and then you complete it however you see fit. You could take 5 minutes to do it. It doesn't even matter.
Very cool. Gotcha. And we're recording now. You want me to roll with that?
Roll with it.
Oh, groovy. I love it. So yeah, I am, when it comes to this podcast, a logotherapist, a helper, a coach, a therapist, a speaker. But most importantly, where I sit today, I am a father and a husband who does all of these things to support my family and my community, and to, look, I'm a little selfish too. I like to help myself out and feel good helping others. So I think somehow that's how I found myself on your podcast and doing this kind of work.
I think that's great. That's beautiful. I feel like this is a proof of concept for this.
I love it. I think it's a great way to start. Yeah, that's awesome.
Give it a shot. Cool. I definitely want to dive into logotherapy, because I hadn't even heard about this until we met.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I became really intrigued, and I was already very familiar with Viktor Frankl, but we'll dive into that in a little bit. The first thing I thought that was really important with how you framed that sentence, that opener, was with context. There was
Mm-hmm.
so much context. You said in relation to this podcast, I am. And so there's framing there, there's context that needs to happen that matter. And then even within that, in or outside of that, more broadly, not only are you those things, not only are you logotherapist, not only are you a therapist, a helper, a speaker, but you're also a father, you're also a husband. And so all of these things have to layer. And if they don't mesh, they don't work. And
So
so
true.
how have you found, or have you found a balance, or what I like to refer to it as a work life harmony rather than a balance? Because balance suggests that there's equilibrium, that there's an equal share. And
Right.
I think anyone that works in fields like yours or anybody's understands
Mm-hmm.
that's not true. And
Mm-hmm.
so how have you been able to find a kind of harmony in those?
Hour by hour is the easy answer. It's ironic. I've spoken about this on a few other podcasts, including my own. Um, right over there is a list of 4 words and the number 2022. Those are my words for the year. And balance is at the top of it. And it hasn't been crossed out yet, but it probably should have been. Um, I think the thing we're looking at now, everybody used to talk about work-life balance, but it really is a work-life integration, being able to do them both and do them well. And for me, quite honestly, as you asked that question, I am. Um, for me, it differs hour by hour.
It's so
Like literally in my role, 55-minute hours, a 4.5-minute break to write some notes, use the restroom, and get back at it. This morning, my first hour professionally was as one of my favorite psychological authors, Dr. Irv Yalom, Yalom. Dude wrote the Bible of group therapy years ago. But anyway, he wrote this book called Love's Executioner. And he gives case studies about how he had to kind of play that role. And sadly, the first time I read this as an undergrad, I'm like, oh, that's horrible. Therapists have to like help people end relationships. And that was the beginning of my day. It's like, man, that was
that's heavy.
it was heavy. And then the
That
next hour was walking the dogs and catching up on bills or something like that. That's where I had to be a father to the dogs and a husband to get the bills paid.
yes. It's so interesting. The the energy that comes from each different type of task is, and how that bleeds into the next, and the amount of time it takes to transition not just to the next task, but yourself mentally in that focus, and to extract, especially if this is all coming from a very specific experience that I had this morning. So
Mhm.
I was listening to the audiobook of Man's Search for Meaning. And so, oh man, that brings you to a real dark place real fast. It's
The first 2/3 are dark, man. Yeah, I mean, his story is a dark story. I mean, what a great hero's journey from darkness into light. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, for people that aren't familiar, A Man's Search for Meaning was a book that was written by Viktor Frankl, and I think that you will be a much better, um, you will have the ability to give his kind of background, what his kind of purpose was post, or maybe even pre
Hmm.
captive and everything. But who was Viktor Frankl?
Yeah, so if we go pre-World War II, right? I mean, his home country of Austria was heavily involved in World War One and didn't win. They were the losers, right? And so you can imagine being a losing nation in the First World War. Times were not great as he was coming into his career. He started out as a young man who was quite a prodigy, was reading and learning in the Austria, the Viennese university system, and he learned about this gentleman by the name of Sigmund Freud. You might have heard of him. And so, young Viktor Frankl is I like to joke, emailing Sigmund Freud. But no, he's corresponding with Sigmund Freud at 17 years old.
Incredible.
And Freud's like, you got some interesting ideas here, young man. And he goes on to study. He becomes oh my goodness, multiple degrees, neurologist, psychologist, psychiatrist. He's a medical doctor specializing in the treatment of the human mind, right? And so he formulates this idea. Freud tells us man is a being in search of pleasure. His student Adler says, no, man is a being in search of power. And then Frankl comes up and says, no, I think we're all searching for meaning. And he starts to formulate his theories. He hasn't started writing yet. He's just writing letters, academic letters, and speaking at the different universities. And of course, next comes World War II, and he has to put those theories to the test. He decides, he's a practicing physician and psychiatrist in Vienna, and he has a visa to come to the United States. And he says, and I'm not sure, in many of his books, maybe even Man's Search for Meaning, he says one of the most meaningful decisions he made was to stay with his mother and father and see them through this. And from that, he spends 3 years in the concentration camps, has to put his ideas to work, and finds out that they do work. And that's the nature of the book, Man's Search for Meanings. The first 2/3 are his experience in the concentration camps, and what his understanding of what he calls logotherapy, the therapy of meaning, how it helped him survive, and how he nearly didn't survive.
It was his relationship with fate was very interesting, and the way that he chose to assume that, especially in the hardest of times. And that I remember that there was this story that he was telling that he would reference back, I think it was to an Iranian folklore that was all about death. And it was he had a chance to escape the prison camp. I don't know if it was Auschwitz or not, but it was one of the places that he ended up during the time. And he ended up visiting one of his patients that he was treating for tuberculosis, and the guy, the one who had TB, was he saw it, he sensed it. He's like, something's going on here, like, you're leaving, aren't you? And he was like, no, of course not. How would I leave? That's ridiculous. so then he goes back to his buddy who's going to take him out, or he's working with to get out, and he's like, I can't go. I can't. I'll leave it to the fates. And that ended up resulting in positive things. I don't remember exactly.
Well, I believe the train he was going to leave on, he was going to either sneak on a train, and that train went to, he was not in a death camp yet.
Right.
But that he found out later that train he was going to leave on actually went to a death camp, and everybody there was eradicated.
Yes. And the same thing happened again later in reverse, where he needed to leave, and then the place that he was at, they ended up devolving into cannibalism. And so it's
well, and even the final part of that part of the story, on that last day before liberation, he was contemplating suicide, as they would call it, running into the wire. He was done. He was tapped out. He couldn't give anymore. And he was on the verge of running into the wire and ending his own life. And that's when the Americans came and liberated that camp.
That's incredible.
I mean, chilling, which is so, it's amazing.
I definitely want to get into your inspiration and how you got into this, but just while we're on the topic, and while we were actually discussing the book, I was taking down notes, and I was like, I want to talk to Dr. Dan about this. Like, this is very interesting. So there's a couple of quotes that I pulled from the book that I want to read and see what your thoughts are on it. Let's see. He says, don't aim at success. The more you aim at,
stop. Oh my God. You hit my favorite right from the start, Matt. Oh, go. All right, let me take a deep breath. My favorite quote in any of his volumes. Please share with your audience. This is one of my favorites.
It's incredible. I stopped dead in my tracks. I forget what I was doing, but I ran to because I was trying to take notes on my phone. I stopped and I'm like, nope, I ran to the computer, stopped everything. I was like, I need to write this down. This is a keeper.
This is one to live by. Go for it.
It's so true. Okay. So he says, don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. That last line, all of that was very intuitive to me. And I feel like I've heard there have been reiterations of that sentiment broken down in social media bites.
Sure.
But I don't think that we're promoting in our current society in this age that very last line. It's one's surrender to a person, not to a cause, but to a person other than oneself. And so that had a lot of impact for me, just in the sense of, I think about living for my kids. I think about living for my wife and for my parents. And then on the flip side, I remember just right now, I'm thinking about this. I always strive to make my parents proud. It's been a core tenet of mine. And I remember when I was probably 10 or 11, and I was lifting weights with my dad, because he was all about getting me into weightlifting. He was making me creatine shakes and stuff. He's like, "You're going to be a football player."
That's awesome.
And so we're lifting, and I remember, and I was like, I'm doing this for you. I said something to that effect. I'm like, "I'm doing this for you." And he's like, "You can't do it for me. Like, you're never going to stick with it if you do it for me. You've got to do it for you." And I think what he was getting at was kind of the first part about this: do it for a cause greater than yourself. It needs to be something that you're guided by. And so I'm just curious about your take and the impact. Obviously, this has a lot of meaning for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that every line of that is just so inspiring. And it was, thank you for reading that. That was like, I've read it and shared it and spoken it many times, but hearing somebody else say it, I mean, it really did bring a little tear to my eyes. So thank you. It's probably my favorite quote in any book I've ever read, now that I've heard you read it. The idea, first of all, that the last few lines really describe his beliefs on the true nature of love. Love is accepting somebody else in all of their uniqueness, and by truly accepting them, we can see their potential and help them reach that potential. But we have to love them in their individuality first, and that's that idea of truly transcending the self to care for somebody other than ourselves, to find that person, as he says, that is, we find to be, to live for, to make proud, to be more important than ourselves. And in that, he talks about, self-transcendence is the single most amazing way to discover meaning in our lives, to step outside ourselves and to serve others.
You already hit on the next point that I was going to drive into, and that was, he talks about the importance of love, and how love is if suffering is an innate part of human existence, and that they are inseparable by your mere existing in the world and in the universe as it is, there will be suffering. And I don't know if he would have said that it was an antidote, but it just feels like the yin to the yang, or the other end of the balance of that scale, is love. And
love provides meaning to suffering, right? And suffering without meaning is just masochism, right? I forget what he says, but it's just, right, it's terrible. It's interesting. I was reading one of my favorites, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, today, and he was saying, what goal is so important in your life that it will help you get past the suffering that is just innate in the human condition? I'm like, yeah, and not just that one big goal you have for like 5 or 10 years, the life goal. Hell, what's going to get you through this week?
Right.
Right? Because this week's got some suffering in it, right? Whether you're here in the Midwest with you and I, or down in Florida dealing with the hurricane, there's some suffering going on. What goal do you have this week that is so important to you? Whether it's just being a good husband, father, loving your family, or maybe it's something more. But that, I think both of them have something to say about suffering is a part of human life. I think we need to accept it rather than try to medicate it away. That's one of my things as a psychologist and psychotherapist, right? That's one of my big beliefs about that first quote. Do not seek happiness. Do not seek success. It will ensue when we pursue something meaningful. But if we're so busy looking for happiness, well, we got plenty of pills for that, but they don't work, right? And we medicate it away rather than embracing the suffering to find something more meaningful.
That's so true. Oh gosh, there's I would derail this conversation if I pursued this next question that involves Jordan Peterson. Um,
Okay,
so
let's take a minute, man, because that's another favorite topic. Let's derail it.
let's do it. Okay, so there was I've listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson, and I think he has a lot of very powerful points. And there's two things that stood out to me. Um, that almost seem like they contradict, but I don't think that they do. And so I'm interested in your perspective. So very simple things, very pragmatic. So he talks one of the rules for life in his first book, in the first 12 rules,
Mm.
was, I think it might be the first rules, make your bed, get up in the morning
Yep.
and make your bed.
Yep.
And so, and if I understand the premise correctly, it's essentially you want to start out with a win. If you can do nothing else to mark a win in your day, in that moment, in your life, because things are so tragic all around you, you have control over this and you can make your bed. And so that's I actually really enjoy I think about Jordan Peterson very frequently when I make my bed in the morning.
Right. Well, and interesting. I was just listening to a song with that today. Your audience has to check out if they enjoy Peterson or anybody like him, Jocko Willink, Joe Rogan. There's a great musician named Akira the Don that takes these quotes and sets them to music. And that's how I start a lot of my mornings is, I get Jordan B. Peterson singing to me in the morning. It's fabulous.
Oh my gosh.
So I highly recommend it.
I just pulled it up. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And ironically, his thing is called The Meaning Wave, right? That's his music. It's so amazing. So where was this question going? See how we derailed it that quickly?
Yep. We derailed the derail. No, that's great. So the second point that I heard him make in, I believe it was his lecture series on maps of meaning. And so he was talking, he's in that, the context of it is he's in a classroom and he's giving a lecture to students of the university that he teaches at. And so one of the things that he's telling his students in the process of this, he's illustrating his points through breaking down Pinocchio at this point. And which I love. I love that. Man. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
the son saving the father from the belly of the beast.
Oh my gosh. There is so I forced my family to sit down and watch Pinocchio after that. I was like, I don't care how old you think it is. We're not watching the new one yet. We're gonna sit down and watch the old one.
By saving his father, the wooden boy becomes a man.
I'm there at the edge of my seat, like watching every scene, having just listened to the entire thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, the meaning here. And my family's like, what's wrong with you?
Well, and that's one of the things that Peterson points out that's pretty universal. Like any good story relates to these universal archetypes, whether it's Pinocchio or Star Wars or Marvel, any movie that Lord of the Rings, those stories, those books that have connected with us throughout history are based on these archetypes. And that's what Peterson, look, you really want to get your head spinning, try reading the book Maps of Meaning. I mean, that he wrote that for a Harvard graduate course, and I'm listening to it again right now, and every line I'm like, oh, pause, I gotta process that. That is just so rich.
He talks about his process of writing that book in particular, and it's incredible. It's exactly what he talks about anytime that he talks about writing. And it's he went through each sentence and re-edited each sentence like 5 or 6 times. He said it would take him I forget the amount of time it would take to write a chapter, but it was very long. And he was like, I don't care. It's like every single point of this is going to be rethought out time and time again to elicit the point. And I think
you can tell every line is just robust with every word. You're like, wait, what? Okay, this, oh my goodness. And it's just amazing. And then to hear him lecture on it, I mean, it's not a huge book. It's a fairly decent college textbook, size wise, but we could all lecture for the rest of our lives upon that and never run out of ideas to talk about. And it's so fun to watch him do that, because he'll talk about, I've seen him a couple times, and he'll just start out with a question, and then just start pacing the stage, making eye contact, making sure you're in there and paying attention, but just watching him walk through it in his own mind, like Socrates or Aristotle or Plato used to. It's an amazing thing to behold.
It was one of those. It's so interesting that you bring those Socrates and Aristotle up. I think I have an image of my mind of what it looked like when they were then, and it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, it was a lot dirtier than what I have in picture in my mind. But I just as I wish that we had the type of public areas that were constructed for beauty and for the duration of centuries.
Mm.
You know, like we don't build anything, especially in the West, especially in the United States. We build almost nothing for 1,000 years from now. Versus if you go to Europe, you see the constructions that are, they're still there, and it's incredible. And we don't do it, and we don't emphasize places of thought outside of the university. You have to be a part of this group in order to gain access to, and just a place you could walk around and be with fellow thinkers just publicly. And I think it would be powerful. I'm going to wrap up the Jordan Peterson point because I want to get more into you. So what he had said was, you have to be careful when you are, if he said, if you're, I think this is the exact verbiage he used, if you're clever, you're going to trick yourself into false productivity. And, if you're clever is probably the exact verbiage. From the rest of it's kind of a regurgitation in my own mind. And so but what he was saying is, and I do this as soon as he said it, I'm like, I do that. I do this all the time. And so I will be working diligently on things that matter to me in my business and my meaning and my purpose. And then I will substitute those things, especially when it's parts of it that I don't want to do, but I know are crucially important, like sales.
Right.
So I will find like, oh, well, I need to make sure that this is taken care of. I have to make sure that dinner is prepped for when my daughter and my wife get home, because I'm the one that works from home. And all of that, I need to make sure this is clean, or I need to do that, or I need to go mow anything. And it's there. None of it is anything less than productive. It's all extremely productive. It's all not easy or straightforward. It all takes, thought and contemplation, and then execution, and making sure that it's done correctly. And so you get done, and then there's that dopamine rush. Like, I had a task, I did it, and now it's done. And so he said, you have to be careful, because if you're clever, you're going to do that. And then once you do that, it is very hard to undo. And that is proven no less than in times when you are extremely stressed. He's like, so you might get out of it. You might create a new, you can help me with the science lingo here, but the new, I don't know if it's a dopaminergic loop or some sort of a feedback loop that exists. You can create new ones, new pathways with the tasks that you want, and create a reward system for those. But when things get rough, if you've set this up, when stress is interjected, if you have a lack of sleep, if there's a fight, if there's anything, you're going to revert back to that way. So you have to be very careful in setting that up. And man, he's so right, because in particular, in stressed out moments, that is what I'll revert to. Like, I need to get stuff done. It's speaking it out loud. I'm like, I need that dopamine hit. Like,
I need to check the boxes. I need to feel that satisfaction.
Give me the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are particular personalities that are even wired more so that way. Those strong, constantly having a list in your head, and you get the check. Okay, ooh, a little bit of dopamine. That felt good. Let's do it again. Check. And before you know it, you haven't had any quiet time, any liminal space, or any time to just think and marinate and meditate and pray, or whatever you want to call it. We need that. And I've been hitting that a lot lately, or actually it's been hitting me from multiple sources, right? Because I can find myself in those positions of got to be busy, got to get stuff done, got to do the work, got to keep the business going, got to see the people, got to help this. And then all of a sudden, I find myself like, oh, wow, where do I go next? And that message has been pretty prominent in the past few months for me, is, you need that quiet time. You need what we call liminal space. You need sometimes, as Frankl calls, the existential dynamics of where you are now and where you're going to go, and embrace that crisis of recognizing you're not there yet. And sometimes you can't task list yourself to being there. Sometimes you just have to wait and embrace that patience. And for guys like you and me, obviously, and many leaders out there, dude, that's so flipping hard,
It is.
right? Like, no, no, no. We've been trained in the past 100 years. If you want something, you work, you do the task, you do the stuff, you make the things happen, and you get there. And sometimes we trick our brain. There is some neurophysiology in there that when we constantly put ourselves under that level of stress, deep inside the lizard brain, we are dripping stress hormone on a constant basis. And I encounter this often in the work I do with leaders and organizations, and even psychotherapy clients. When we're under that level of stress for too long, COVID being a great example, or prolonged work stress, and then all of a sudden it's over, right? We recognize it's over, but the brain goes, no, 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 no. I'm going to keep dripping that stress hormone because you've got to be ready. That big saber-toothed tiger is ready to jump out. You got to fight, flight, or freeze. And we find it really hard to relax, to slow down. And it takes a conscious effort to slow the brain down. We have to, as you and I were talking beforehand, we have to have those times outside, walking the dogs, walking in nature, just sitting quietly and breathing or meditating so that the brain can get back to not being stressed. It's hard work.
I feel like that's when you really get to know yourself too. And
And
that,
it's terrifying, isn't it?
oh, it's so terrifying. And because I know this, and I'll dive in just for half a second. And it's when I have to choose. I have selectively said that I'm not going to have any input or conscious output going on. I'm blessed to be able to have a sauna in our garage, right? So I don't have to like go to the gym, which is very helpful with our physical location.
Mhm.
So that is my quiet space.
Mm.
So when I go in there, like there's no media, there's no audiobooks, there's no podcast. I prefer no music. And it's
Mhm.
just pure unbridled silence. And I get real excited about it up until the point when I open the door. And and then it's like,
That's awesome.
I know who I am, and I know a lot of my demons, or I should say I know where a lot of them reside. And
Right.
so, and I know we're gonna get into it. I'm like, oh gosh, like am I ready for this again? But it's one of those things where when I was at my best frequently and hitting it at least 4 or 5 times a week,
Yep.
it's you go in there and it's like it's more rejuvenating. It's not this battle. It's like, oh, I know where there's a little bit of smoke coming from a small little fire over there. Let's go walk around that and see what's
Mhm.
sparking those flames. And so it's very, I think that silence is very important. I think removing yourself from those outputs or those inputs is crucial.
I can tell you how important it is on so many levels, from mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, whichever way you want to go. But just overall, it is. But it's so hard for us to do in our times. I know some of my greatest times, some of the times I felt that the healthiest have been when I'm engaging in regular prayer or meditation practices in the morning. And then, like you said, though, at some point it gets to be a little much. I'm like, all right, I got to step back from that.
Yep.
And then I crave it. Like, okay, just a little bit of quiet meditation, just
Yes.
a little bit of that, and it can change everything. But we don't give ourselves time enough for it.
Nope. No, we certainly don't. And that's I think sometimes people get nervous with the lack of um right a lack of purpose with it without they're saying there's like a lack of understanding of what the purpose of the silence is. And they go into like,
Right.
okay, what am I'm
I have to
as
be accomplishing something. What's the
right.
checklist for these moments of silence?
And you can guide me here. I forget if it was Jung or Nietzsche, but this was staring into the abyss, right? And to
I,
find yourself, or to find like the demons within or the dragons that
yeah.
you have to slay.
Well, dragons is definitely Peterson
That's
these days,
definitely
but
Peterson. Yep.
I think the abyss may have been Nietzsche.
I think that's right. And so, but that doesn't serve well enough as the purpose. Like I'm not gonna go. Like my purpose is to go stare into the abyss. Nothing about that's appeasing.
Yeah.
What I used to walk myself into these was gratitude, and it's actually it's my fallback in the stress. So when I'm in the sauna and it's like minute 45,
Mm-hmm.
and there I'm like, oh, my mind starts going into, well, you've done a good job. Listen, you got to
Right.
work out and you did good. If you stop now, like your body's still getting all these benefits. I go straight into gratitude. I have a
Yeah.
hard time. My inner voice has a hard time peaking up while I'm engaging in gratitude, and so that's been my cheat code.
Well, and we know, I mean, current research and anybody that follows Brene Brown knows that, gratitude is huge. And not just Brene Brown, but, the modern research into it says that just coming up with a list, coming up with ideas, thinking through that, looking at what we're grateful for is so healing in so many positive ways. I know back when I used to work with adolescent substance abuse clients, I was in an intensive program. One of their homework assignments every week went, hey, come up with a gratitude list, see how far you can go. And like 100 was just cool. I'm like, all right, who can come up with 1,000 this week? And they're like, oh no, we can't do that. But when you sit and you intentionally think about that, these guys would come back like, oh dude, I came up with like 1,200. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, that's awesome. And they felt
It's
great about it. I mean, imagine if we just took time to come up with 10 each day.
it rewires the way that you see the world around you. That's one of the
Hmm.
things that I talk about when I'm working with business and I'm doing my training, is that if you start incorporating conscious gratitude in the morning, in your mornings, just like you said, 10 things, spend
Hmm.
3.5 minutes. It doesn't have
Hmm.
to be absurd, but start doing that, make it a habit,
Hmm.
and it starts restructuring the way that you're seeing the world around you. And so when you see somebody doing something that you're really not interested in, then for me, that turned into, I've said this more times in the last 3 months than I think I ever, my entire life previous to it. And it's, I'm so happy that people like you exist, because if the world was full of me, that would never get done. Like I would never in a million years do that, desire to do that. But I'm so grateful that not only can you do it, you can do it very well. And
Hmm.
I'm appreciative of that. And it's just that kind of gratitude. Then that person's like, oh my gosh, like I don't
Hmm.
even really enjoy doing this, but I appreciate the fact, it turns into this whole
Right.
cycle.
Well, and I want to you use the word restructure a couple times, and I really want to hit on that. Like from a neurological point of view, we are honestly, I was just reading about this again this morning. We can't always control our conditions, our circumstances, the conditions we grew up with, the work we have to do, the brain we were given. Um, but we always have the opportunity to change it. And literally, gratitude, healthy interactions, psychotherapy, truly rewires, reconnect, builds new connections, synapses, neurons in the human brain to strengthen it. So, I mean, if you want to go in a positive direction, these gratitude ideas can truly impact the physical structure of your brain to make it healthier versus walking around angry and grumpy all day long. Yeah, it's going to change your brain. It's not going to be the way you want it to then. So,
It's very true.
yeah.
So obviously you're very well read and you understand these topics extremely well. What was the motive, that kind of first thing that drew you in the direction of psychology? And was that separate in line of your interest in logotherapy? Was it, I'm interested, I want to be a therapist, and then later on you discovered logotherapy? What was your kind of origin story in this regard?
So I think I've thought of this in a few, especially recently. I can't remember. It may have been a Jocko Willink podcast with some therapists, like trying to understand. I really don't know what got me into psychology. I actually had to ask my dad a little while ago, a few years ago, like, "Hey, pops, why did you send me to college?" And he honestly, this was his answer. I mean, it was so much meaning there, right? He just looks at me and goes, "That's what everybody else was doing." Right? Like literally. And I look back and I recognize I grew up in steel mill country, right? It was either, and many of my friends still work for the mills and truly are killing it, doing great work out there. Good for them. I'm glad you guys are at it. I wound up in college, and psychology was always an interest of mine. And honestly, I don't know why. Maybe it was Silence of the Lambs. That might have been that era, or just trying to understand human interaction. I had a basic course in high school, and just read a lot. Back in those days, I'm gonna totally date myself here, right? But like, man, this is embarrassing. I remember when the first Barnes and Noble opened up around our house, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go find these. we got books to look at, man. And I honestly, as I think about that, I was the nerd always at the library. Now, don't get me wrong. I would go with my buddies and we would take our comic books and we would photocopy pages of our comic books so we can post them on our walls in our bedroom. But I was in the library, dude. So I mean that
Yeah, that's right.
there was some osmosis going on there. So I go off to college because that's all my parents knew to do. I went to the what we like to call the Harvard of Muncie, Indiana,
Oh
Ball State
yeah.
University. So right, the Harvard of Muncie, and I started out in psychology. And after my freshman year, I looked around, and of the dozen or so people I hung around with, I was the only one left. And I'm looking like,
Wow.
what? And they're all like, yeah, we got that magic letter that said, good try, but don't come back. So I
Wow.
had a cool opportunity to reinvent myself. I played hockey there and continued to study psychology. Some of the friends I played hockey with one day said, "Hey, let's start a fraternity." I was like, "I have no interest in this." They're like, "Let's give it a try." So, okay, let's do it. Got nothing better to do besides study. And for me, that was a I could take all the classes in the world. That was a real life study in organizational psychology, management, working with a diverse group of individuals to accomplish a goal. And man, I loved it. And that was a great time. I loved it so much. I took I like to say college was the best 9 or 10 years of my life. Now, I did walk away from that university with two pieces of paper saying I studied for a certain amount of years and a wife. So it was a really good time.
Yeah.
Um, I went on to get my master's degree in counseling there and went on to be a therapist, did some work in Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Detroit, Chicago area for this adolescent substance abuse treatment program. And through that work, really refined my how I see therapy and helping people. And then it was probably about, I was done there. I was going into private practice. Um, we had lived kind of the city life with two young girls and finally decided my wife's originally from what I like to lovingly refer to as Farmville, Indiana. And it was a choice between go open up another substance abuse treatment center in the Chicagoland area or raise the kids in Farmville. And so we decided to raise them in Farmville. Um, they still question that decision sometimes. We're mostly happy with it. They are well on their way into their lives. My oldest is a college student. My youngest is a senior in high school.
Wow.
And so going back to about 10 years ago, I was rereading Man's Search for Meaning. For some reason, I know the exact reason it popped up. I'm a huge fan of the HBO series Band of Brothers, World War II history.
Yes.
Oh, right?
I wa-
So,
I it's I watch it every I was in the 82nd, and so I am
all right.
it was
Whoa.
it was bred into us, but I didn't even watch it until I think after I left the airborne entirely. But
No kidding.
it was very interesting, and now ever since I watched it the first time, it has been an annual return to. Like
Yep.
I will watch it again every single year, and it has that level of impact again every single year.
It
It
is an
is
amazing story.
it's
I too, me and a group of my close friends, mostly from college, we do it every year around Thanksgiving and Christmas time. We actually traveled to Georgia together to climb Currahee a couple years ago,
that
and
is incredible.
it was really and now we're going to do one of the tours here in the next couple years.
Yes.
We're planning on going. So just that story, the history of World War II, those men and what they did. I mean, I think I've read every book from the gentleman that served. Major Dick Winters
Yes.
is huge in his philosophy and what I teach in leadership and organizational psychology. Um, all of that to say, I was reminded of this psychologist, psychiatrist who was, a concentration camp survivor in World War II. Like, oh yeah, what was that guy's name? Because as you experienced, and I talk about this a lot, he is a footnote in many psychology texts. And I believe, obviously, one that needs to be brought more to prominence. We are in such a need to understand the search for meaning in our current times. And I believe this pre-COVID, but even more so now. So much so that my instructors through my doctorate program got tired of hearing me say more people need to know about this. Matt, I'm telling you, I wrote that different ways in almost every dang paper I wrote. And they're finally like, okay, you can stop now. We get the point. quit writing it, go do something about it. I said, okay.
Well, that is incredible
Yeah.
because I don't know if that's missing now generally from life or universities, but a call to action based on
Hmm.
somebody who is so driven by it, especially such a specific idea and ideology. I
Hmm.
wouldn't even classify it as that, but
We're
that
starting to
is
call it a philosophy now.
yes,
Hmm.
yes. That that's powerful. Good on them. And so what was your response? Like
Good
what
on them. And what a terrible mistake they made pushing me to go do that, because now I can't stop, Matt. Anybody that comes to me with a podcast, I'm like, yes, when I'm there, I'm on. I've got my own, the Meaning Project. I will speak
Yes.
to anybody, large group or small group. I will, sometimes much to the frustration of my wife, like, yep, yep. Where do you want me to talk? I'm there. I'm in. Let's talk about this, because I believe it is so important in our current times to understand that we are all in this search for meaning. And even though meaning can be such a ethereal, nebulous concept, there are concrete ways by which we should be engaging this and seeking meaning in our lives.
That's beautiful. That is insanely powerful. I could go with you for hours. We could turn this into a whole Joe Rogan experience and go for hours, but I know that we're both busy people. I don't want to take a bunch of your time.
Next time we'll set up a 3 hours, and I believe Rogan pours what is it? He pours Buffalo Trace whiskey, so that's what allows him to go 3 hours. I
That's
think.
right. That's
Yeah,
what that's the juice.
that is.
But no, that would be incredible. I definitely look forward to being able to do this again. But if there are organizations or if there are individuals that are interested in learning more, obviously, like you said, you had talked about the Meaning Project, they can go and listen to your episodes that you've done on there, which are incredible. Had some
Thank you.
amazing guests on there. And then where else can they where are you putting out information? Are you active on social media? Are you or
Oh,
do
I'm
you have events
terrible on
coming up?
social media. Most of the events I have coming up right now are private corporate events. But if you want to have me at a private corporate event, or if you just want to chat, actually, somebody later this evening hit me up on the from the podcast. He said, "Hey, any direction I can go?" I said, "Yeah. You want to get on a Zoom call and talk about it?" This poor guy didn't know what he was getting in for, because he just emailed me like, "Hey, what other resources can I read?" I gave him a few lines. He's like, "Yep, I read those." I said, "Dude, we need to get on a Zoom call. Let's chat." And he's like, "Really?" Abs I Look, I'm not Joe Rogan, man. I want to be personal and connect with people. So if you want to talk to me about these kinds of things, you can find out more. All of this is at the one website, danielafranz.com. That's DANIELAFRANZ.com. The podcast is there, the YouTube videos, what I do, who I am, and the links to all of my very poorly formatted social media attempts. I'd like to think of myself as a good logotherapist and speaker. I'm a terrible accountant and social media guru. So
Well, one step at a time, 10% better each day.
there we go. Don't try to be better than others. Try to be better than yourself just a
Oh
little bit
my
each day.
gosh, that's so it's what there are so many powerful. We could have ended this after like the first 5 minutes with the power and the value that was added. So thank you so much. I
My
know
pleasure,
that
Matt.
everyone got a lot out of this. If you did, please comment. If you had any questions, throw them in the comments, and I can make
Mhm.
sure that Dan gets them, and we can even further the conversation if you guys are interested. But again, thank you, Dan. I appreciate your time. This was incredible as always. Once I get to New York, I'm hoping for a round 3.
Oh, that would be awesome. Let's do it.
All right, perfect.